Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 14, the final part of our reading of Neptune 1 is Missing. It is a book by Hugh Walters, and we're going to go over the copyright information, which clearly says here Neptune 1 is missing. Copyright 1969 by Hugh Walters, first American edition, all rights reserved, including the right to reproduce this book or portions thereof. So, Anyways, there was some bad news because their jet guns ran out of power again, and they're having trouble getting the ship to decelerate, so they've come up with some strategies. Anyways, we're going to see how this turns out, because this is the final part. "We'll do it," he announced triumphantly. "It's hopeless," he groaned a moment later, and so it went, and so it fluctuated. An hour followed hour. As hour followed hour, Neptune 1, still turning slowly, was approaching the Earth. Soon the critical point would be reached where they would know definitely whether the ship would ever get into orbit or whether those four young men would be carried away into space. The staff almost forgot to breathe as they watched Sir George. Suddenly he jerked upright in his wheelchair. "Launch the Ariel," he snapped. So there was a chance. Ariel was the rescue ship on constant standby at the Cape. It was a fleet little vessel that had more than once snatched astronauts from ships out of control. Sir George wouldn't be ordering it to take off unless he thought there was a possibility of its fulfilling its task. Though his body was feverish and weak, his mind was working with its former precision and efficiency. He took the decision to launch Ariel because he realized long before any of his colleagues in control that Neptune 1 would never break sufficiently to allow itself to be captured by the pull of Earth. So the rescue ship must chase after it before it went shooting past into space. "We're sending Ariel up after you," Sir George called over the radio. "She should sight you in half an hour." The astronauts heard the message and knew what it meant. It would have been great to put the old ship down under its own power, but this was obviously impossible. Chris hated to abandon ship, but those were his orders, and he set about his preparations. There was nothing much to show for this unhappy voyage to Neptune, except a few reels of tape, and those he packed carefully away, ready for the transfer. Maury had worked out that they were now less than 1,000,000 miles from Earth's orbit and were rapidly overtaking it. "I wonder how close we shall get," murmured Tony. "Ariel is on its way," came the message from control in the well-known voice of Whiskers. Only a few seconds now passed between message and answer, for the radio time lag had almost disappeared, so it was easier to chat with old Whiskers than when they had to wait hours for a reply. Then, for the last time, they set the chemical motor to work during the slow turn through the critical arc. It was just before the full arc had been completed, and the last pound of fuel was burned, and the motor was dead. "At least we haven't wasted any gas," Maury observed wryly, as he and the others began to put on their spacesuits. Even before they had finished, Whiskers told them that Ariel reported having them on its radar screen. The rescue ship would now lock on to the signal reflected from its quarry and would be intercepting in just over 5 minutes. "Take a last look around the old ship," Chris said to his companions as they waited to fasten their helmets. "Can't say I'm sorry to see the back of her," Tony ventured, and silently Chris had to agree this had been the most unfortunate command he'd had. Yet somehow he didn't like letting Neptune 1 face her fate alone. "Ariel to Neptune 1, a new voice broke in. "We're closing in on you. When we're alongside, we'll give ourselves a twist to match yours. It will make transfer much easier. Thanks, Ariel." Thanks, Ariel. "Are we glad to see you?" Tony replied, for he was nearest the microphone. Serge was at the observation port, and it wasn't long before he called out that he had spotted their rescuer. A shining point of light was rapidly growing in size, and soon he made out the rescue ship before Neptune 1's motion took it out of his sight. Here we are, then," the voice of Ariel's pilot announced. "I'm moving in to about 12 feet of you. Think you can jump that gap?" "Of course," Tony called back indignantly. "What do you think we are?" "All right," the voice laughed back, "but don't forget, You haven't any guns. Shall I send you a line across? We'll manage, Tony answered grimly. One at a time, the Neptune's crew entered the airlock. As they opened the outer door, they could see the welcome sight of the rescue ship coasting alongside, because Ariel's pilot had exactly matched the movement of the doomed ship. Both vessels appeared to be motionless. Only the slow movement of the starfield reminded them that they were still rolling over on their headlong course. Tony, Maury, and Surge made their leaps across the void and in turn passed through the Ariel's airlock to safety. Now it was Chris who must make the jump. He hung clinging to the casing of his ship. With the final pat for Neptune 1, he sprang into space and floated across to the rescue ship's airlock. It seemed incredible, after all they had been through, to find themselves safely back at Cape Kennedy. The cooling off, quote-unquote, time before the hatch could be opened seemed endless, but at last they were able to scramble out and breathe Earth's atmosphere in great gulps. They were strangely silent as the jeep sped them to the control building. There was Whiskers, there was Mr. Gillianders, Professor Boronoff, Dr. Rosenberg, and a score more of their friends waiting outside the main entrance. As the jeep drew nearer, Chris and his crew could see the frantic wavings and hear the rolling cheers. They stood up and waved back vigorously. But where was Uncle George? It was incredible that he should go off duty just as they touched down. They couldn't imagine him waiting patiently in his office for them to report had anything happened. They poured out of the jeep and were immediately engulfed in a crowd of excited people. Everyone from the base, it seemed, was there to welcome them. Eager hordes of pressmen fought jubilant scientists to get nearer. It was 4 breathless young men who had just managed to find refuge in control. Where is he? Chris managed to ask. He's not been well, Whiskers tried to explain. He'll be along in a minute. The crew couldn't believe that the frail figure that was being pushed toward them in a wheelchair could be Sir George Benson. But it was, and they rushed to meet him. It was a week later that Sir George Benson announced his retirement as director of UNEXA. Though the return of his friends had been a wonderful tonic to him, he'd had his warning. Like a wise man, he preferred to hand over before his powers began to fail him, especially as Mr. Gillianders was appointed his successor. Sir George smiled indulgently at as the young people danced at the party he'd given to mark his gratitude to his ex-colleagues. Chris, Maury, Serge, and Tony spent almost as much time around their old friend's chair as they did propelling partners through the crowd. Mr. Gillianders sometimes joined them, and Whiskers was there too. The ex-director spoke quietly. It's been a wonderful partnership, he said with evident feeling, but now I can sit back and watch from the sidelines. Don't think you're running away from everything, Billy Gillianders warned him. I just want a great deal of your help and advice. Oh, I shall want a great deal of your help and advice. Sir George looked at him Sir George looked at his successor gratefully. He'd certainly like to be kept in the picture, and for some time they talked together. Of course, I shall want a deputy, Mr. Gillianders broke in. Who he'll be hasn't been decided, though. I know whom I'd like. As his words sank in, all eyes were turned in one direction. Yes, they were looking at Chris. He should have been proud, of course, but was he? Was it worthwhile being recommended for this marvelous appointment if it meant the end to his journey in space? He must take a long time before he made up his mind. And that's going to do it. That's it. We have been reading from Neptune 1 is Missing, and the book is done. This is a book by Hugh Walters. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, then all that information will be in the description below. I believe that the book that will take this book's place will be The Princess Bride, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.